What's up, real MVPs? Ricky Widmer here, and welcome in to a very special video, a very special podcast, however you want to look at it, because a couple changes here. First off, welcome into MVP Entertainment, Ricky Widmer, joined with my beautiful co-host, Soapy Muffin.
Oh, hey.
And Soapy, we got a little special treat for the viewers out there in YouTube land. Not really Twitch land, this is more of a YouTube land kind of a thing of, you guys know the deal. We do wrestling podcasts all the time. And we used to do them once a month. A week early for the patrons. Everyone else gets a week later. But this comes with a special announcement at the beginning of it to where Soapy and I were talking. And Soapy's like, you know what? I would like to talk about wrestling more. And I was like, dude, you got me covered. Like, I would love to talk about wrestling more. So we have made the choice to change the podcast, our wrestling podcast here in MVP Entertainment, to a weekly thing. So we will have weekly wrestling content for you guys. And this is kind of like the first of that, but really a special edition, a pre-episode to that first one, because we got a draft coming up this week. Starting this week on Friday Night Smackdown, we've got the WWE Draft for 2020, and then it concludes on the next Monday for Raw. So Soapy and I decided, hey, before we record our first of the weekly podcasts tomorrow, which would technically be, I think, episode 3 of our wrestling podcast, let's do a special one and kind of slip this in here for episode 3. Patrons, that's why you, gold patrons, that's why you're not getting this a week early and everyone's getting it right away, because the draft happens on Friday. So we wanted everyone to be able to see our predictions and how they go down. Very quickly before we start, if you want to support us, patreon.com/MVPvids is how you do that. If you want to get the wrestling podcasts like this a week early before anyone else, that is how you do it. Gold members get that exclusive content and get to see this a week before the millions and millions of people listening to the People's Podcast. But we've got a special task today, Soapy, and that is predicting or making our predictions for the WWE 2020, I almost said NFL, the WWE 2020 draft. And one thing we're confused about, Soapy, that I've got to set up here is, will NXT be involved in this? Because even WWE has been a little cryptic on this. When Triple H talked about it in the past, he mentioned that NXT will be involved in a draft. And then this Monday, the @WWE Twitter account put out a tweet that said, like, oh, who should the number one pick be? The first one included NXT. They then deleted that, put up a new one, and NXT was gone. It was just Raw and SmackDown. So what we are going to do is we are going to talk about that. If NXT is included, what could happen with their roster. But we're going to do that at the end. How this podcast will be kind of segmented up. We're going to talk about the women's division. We're going to talk the men's division, tag, and then NXT, giving our full predictions of where we see people going. And that's pretty much how we're going to do it. So, Soapy, we're just going to dive right in. We're going to start with the women. And before we start our conversation, I will ask you first, what does your women's division look like? What are your predictions for Raw and SmackDown after the 2020 draft?
Yeah, and this one was kind of more of a challenge to me, and especially because, I talked about multiple times the view of, like, I don't know how many people actually end up moving, especially since right now a lot of the people who are on the rosters aren't competing, mostly because of the pandemic, and they don't want to be traveling.
Mm-hmm.
And so my list is, I kind of limited a little bit to, like, people that I think would be notable people. So I have my Raw Women's Division filling out to be Asuka, Zelina, Candice LeRae, Dana Brooke, Bianca Belair, Shayna Baszler, Nia Jax, Mickie James, the boring one, Natalya, Lana, and obviously Ruby Riott, Liv Morgan, but they could just go under Riot Squad.
Yeah, that was the thing. So I put them as like individual women, but technically they would be a tag team. Like, even with Nia and Shayna, it's like, well, technically they're a tag team. Which one do I put them in on our sheet? But yeah, you're saying they would stay on Raw, right?
Yeah. And then I have Natalia, Lana, and Billy Kay as the main people who stay. Obviously, I didn't put Billy Kay on there just because, mostly because I got tired. But I do know, I know my list in my head. So
that's your SmackDown one is just the 4?
yeah.
You listed only 4 for SmackDown?
Well, no, there was the whole Asuka, Zelina, like all the people above, and I just relisted the 2 people at the bottom.
Oh, so you're still doing your Raw thing. Okay, because I'm looking at your spreadsheet right now. Okay.
Yeah, just note there are gaps, but I do know the people that I have going.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, so then let me look at the women's one. I have the women's division being Alexa Bliss, Bayley, Carmella, Lacey Evans, Naomi, Billie Kay, Sasha Banks, Rhea Ripley. Let me see here, unless I'm dumb. Did I already say Naomi?
No, I don't think you have.
All right, Naomi, Sonya, and Tamina.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of women moving in this one. Obviously, I know it was more of and Peyton Royce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of women moving, and it's mostly because right now I think with the fact that two of the biggest female stars in your company are out with Becky and Charlotte.
Yeah.
We are leaving them off the board for being picked just because they are hurt. Well, one's hurt and one's having a kid, so. But like we're holding them off on their own, and I think it's just they fill them in wherever they need to go. So I think it's right now with this, it kind of gives SmackDown kind of stays the same. You know, they just get a few other people, especially in addition to Rhea Ripley's a very needed one.
Yeah. And for me, you're going to notice a little bit of a surprise here, Soapy. A couple of surprises, because you say you don't have the women's division mixing up much. I do. And showing up my predictions for Raw, I've got Asuka, Mandy Rose, Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler. We're keeping them together. Bianca Belair and Ruby Riott and Liv Morgan all staying on Raw. The 2 big additions that I have happening, because I'm assuming they're going to do it similar to how they did last year's draft, where they'll have 4 rounds for SmackDown and then 6 rounds for Raw, having 2 rounds every hour of the show. I was kind of thinking, and last year, you know me, I'm a numbers guy, where it's like, okay, let's see what the numbers were last year. And last year, for the SmackDown draft, SmackDown got 6 new people. Like, they drafted 6 new people from Raw. They lost 2 people on that night. On Raw brought in 11 new people. They lost 5 people from last year. So I was kind of trying to keep the same motive of like, okay, on night 1, you're going to have people moving. And that's why for me, I think Sasha Banks moves brands on night 1 of the draft. How I think it goes down is she is a championship match with Bayley. I think she loses that match. And in order to kind of keep that going along, Raw drafts her at the end of the night on Friday. That's kind of your big like, oh shit, Sasha Banks will be on Raw this upcoming Monday. The other shock to me happens early on Raw the next following Monday is Rhea Ripley comes to Raw. Those are my 2 surprises. Sasha and Rhea come over to Raw. You need to energize that roster. You need to kind of give that Raw women's division a shot in the arm. Because for the women's side on SmackDown, Alexa Bliss stays, Nikki Cross stays, Bayley stays as your champ. Carmella, I don't think they'll move her because of the vignettes. Naomi, Lacey Evans, Tamina, Billie Kay. The big things that move over is they get Peyton Royce, they get Natalia, and they get my other big NXT star coming over. They get Chelsea Green. So it's kind of like Raw gets Rhea Ripley. Chelsea Green, who was supposed to make her debut. It got pulled because she was infected by coronavirus. That everything that I've seen from like a week or 2 ago is saying that she's getting over coronavirus. So if she is good to go medically from that and is not going to transmit the disease, I expect her to be drafted. And Soapy, you mentioned it. The big kind of, what should I say, the wrench in all of this is Becky and Charlotte are not there. Like, the two pillars of your women's division are not there, to where the first thing I want to ask you is Sasha and Bayley. Because you have them staying on the same brand after the draft. I have them getting split up. And the reason why I was thinking that is, one, holy shit moment at the end of Smackdown. Number two, how long do you want this feud to go? Do you want it to end at Hell in a Cell, or do you want to kick it down the curb until you get to basically WrestleMania? And for me, that's the end goal for me with this feud, is it needs to end at WrestleMania. Well, how do I do that? Let me pull Sasha away from Bayley, have her forced to focus on other women for a while, and then we get back to that when we get into the WrestleMania road. What is your thought about me splitting up Bayley and Sasha in the draft?
I mean, it makes both divisions, honestly, it makes it both better in a weird way, of where it's like, I think the plan that they were trying to go for with the women's division before, with the 4 horsewomen, is 2 on each brand. Obviously, since 2 of the 4 are missing now, I think you need to have a horsewoman on each brand, obviously, beside NXT, because NXT has an absolute massive fucking roster. But I think with the idea that keeping this feud going, like, obviously you can have it that, like, you know, like, you can even have it like the whole time Sasha's on Raw with that, she's still bringing up Bayley, of like, oh, I haven't forgotten what Bayley did.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So I think you could find a way to make it work. But I, like, personally for me, I'm in the sense of, you could have it, because they have trades and stuff like that, that it'll be, like, I think when Sasha beats her at WrestleMania, you have Raw trade for Bayley, because I don't think Bayley would be the champion at the end of the feud.
Yeah, well, here's kind of what I'm thinking, and yet again, I am already planning, I'm writing out, like, how I would do the feud, but based off of what WWE has put in front of us, this is what I would do if I was WWE, and this is kind of just a rough draft. Is Sasha gets pulled over to SmackDown, and you might think, but Ricky, you also have Rhea Ripley coming over to Raw as well. Like, wouldn't that create kind of a who should be the number 1 contender? And what I think happens is Sasha comes in, and as soon as she is drafted to Raw, I'm the head bitch in charge. Basically what we say about Mia Yim. That is Sasha Banks. Asuka, I am instantly your greatest threat for the title. I am coming for you. I am going to make you pay. I am taking back my Raw Women's Championship that Sasha held not too long ago. And what I would do is I would have them... Here's one mini question for you, Soapy. We already know there's going to be 2 Hell in a Cell matches at Hell in a Cell. Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton. But also, we're going to have Jey Uso versus Roman Reigns again. Does that mean we're pretty much capped with the Hell in a Cell matches at Hell in a Cell? Or could there be 3 on the night for that pay-per-view?
I don't think they normally do 3. So I think we may already be capped out on it.
Okay.
But I think there may be a slight chance. Okay. Because I'm trying to think. I think Sasha's been involved in every single woman's. Yeah, I think she has.
And the reason why I asked that is part of me wants to go Hell in a Cell match, Sasha and Asuka for the championship. But even if it's not in Hell in a Cell, they have a match on that pay-per-view, and Sasha shades. You know what? I even go shades of Bayley when she beat Charlotte. Remember when Bayley turned heel on SmackDown and she had that match against Charlotte? I go Sasha beats down Asuka to where it's like they have a good match. Like Asuka's in it. You keep Asuka strong. But after, Sasha hits her with the bank statement and she's got her in it, she just goes all out on Asuka. Basically saying, I am not the same person that I was. Bayley has changed. Bayley has unlocked something, and WWE are trying to protect their champion. They're trying to protect Bayley because they're afraid of what I'm going to do to her. So as soon as she wins that title at Hell in a Cell, the next Raw, Sasha comes out to cut a promo. She lifts up that title soap. And you know what she says? Bayley. And just points to the title. Because guess what? Even though she's on Raw, Bayley cannot hide from her. Survivor Series, they will be going at each other again. And I think you set up a Survivor Series match with Sasha and Bayley. They get another pay-per-view match to keep that feud going. The only thing is, how would you insert Io Shirai into that? Because I'm assuming NXT is going to be in Survivor Series again, like they were last year. TLC, you can do whatever you want. I would probably do something by at that point at TLC. Rhea Ripley has gone through, like, during this time, Rhea Ripley on Raw is just going through the women's roster. She is just every fucking woman you throw at her. Beat. To where right before TLC, there's a number one contenders match. Whoever wins will face Sasha for the women's title. And I think you have an Asuka Rhea match, and you can either do it one of two ways. You can do it where Rhea just beats out Asuka. However, Asuka then losing the championship and then losing to Rhea. Are you burying Asuka? You could also do the thing where it'll be a triple threat match, a triple threat tables match or ladders match or a chairs match at TLC that will include Sasha, Rhea, Asuka. At that point, I have either Asuka or Rhea. If you want to put the championship on Rhea, you can. If you want to put it back on Asuka, you can do that too. Basically, Sasha loses it at TLC because then at the Rumble in January, Sasha wins the Rumble. Bayley, I'm coming for you. That's where that trade happens that you talked about. And then Sasha moves back to SmackDown to continue your, like, Royal Rumble to WrestleMania, your main feud between Bayley and Sasha.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them doing something like that. The only thought process I have, though, that sounds really convoluted just for them to end up basically exactly where they started off at.
Yeah, I mean, well, the reason why is, and it comes back to the question I'll ask you, does this feud between Sasha and Bayley have to happen at WrestleMania? Or can it end at a pay-per-view, not WrestleMania?
I mean, I think you can make it to WrestleMania. The whole thing is you just have to keep it that it's Sasha and Bayley aren't at each other, which is what they're fucking up with, is that they're going at each other.
Yeah.
It's also the reason I don't see them moving Sasha is they're probably going to have it that in their match coming up, either Sasha's going to fuck up her neck even more.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically that they're going to, like, force her to be sidelined.
Yeah.
And then, like, that's what they'll do is, at that point, that's when they fully withdraw her.
Mm-hmm.
And then she re-debuts at the Rumble.
Yeah. No, good point. Like, because, yeah, that's the main thing I'm thinking about is, like you said, that the one thing they're fucking up is if you want this feud to get to WrestleMania, you have to go ahead and split them up. That's why I have them getting split via the draft, but also, the last thing I wanted to talk about, the women, are the NXT call-ups, where I feel like, for me personally, the only two that we can see, I know a lot of prediction articles have, Candice LeRae will get called up, or I saw one where Tegan Nox, I was like, Tegan Nox has an ACL injury. She ain't getting called up to the draft anytime soon. To me, there's only two. Rhea Ripley, who we have not seen since I think the last match she had was that Battle Royale match that Candice LeRae won to set up her match at TakeOver 31 that happened this past weekend. That's one. And then if Chelsea Green is cleared, I think that's two. In your mindset, Soapy, are those the only two from NXT we can see called up? Do you see any other viable women? And if Rhea and Chelsea are the ones, what would be your plan for them via the draft, and where would you kind of put them brand-wise?
So I have it that Candice LeRae gets called up, because I also have it that it's her and Johnny get called up at the same time.
You gotta say it like Wade Barrett, the Garganos.
Yeah, the Garganos.
Not Gargano, Gargano.
Yeah, you go from Midwest to probably the weird way to saying it.
Yeah.
But I think there's a few women who could get called up. Because obviously it mostly depends on just if you think some of the people are ready. Like, obviously, me and you both have Rhea Ripley getting called up.
Yeah.
I think it's right now, I view Rhea Ripley as like the big fish in a little pond. Of where it's like she doesn't fit in that roster, because right now you can see they're kind of moving on from her. And it's like, okay, the main roster needs her. They're showing that like they don't really need Rhea Ripley in NXT.
Yeah.
Because especially since NXT just filters in people from the Performance Center anyways. It's like, okay, like it's time for someone to move on. I see Rhea moving on. Obviously, if Chelsea Green's medically cleared to come back and everything, she can go up to the main roster. Because, I mean, she technically got the massive rub when she had the match with Charlotte, over it was her and Charlotte, and they won.
Well,
like,
all the news are like Wrestling Observer and stuff. Meltzer has said that she was supposed to get a push earlier, and it basically got pushed back. Then she got COVID because she tweeted out a week ago that she just had gotten over COVID and stuff. So it was like, oh shit, she was one of the ones that got coronavirus, so that's why we haven't seen her. And then obviously you got the rumors of like, oh, they're pushing back her debut because she's, I believe it's Zack Ryder who she's married to. That's Matt Cardona, right?
Yeah.
Is Zack Ryder,
Yep.
who's now with AEW. So it's like, that I don't believe. I don't think Vince is going to shade her because she's married to Zack Ryder, who's not now in AEW.
they kind of done it to Lana.
Wouldn't put past her. Yeah, but Rusev, I think Rusev left the company a little bit on better terms than Zack Ryder did.
I mean, they both got released.
Yeah, but like, I think Rusev maybe had some choice words when he came out. You know what I'm saying? Like, Rusev,
Maybe.
if he did, had a reason to be mad at Vince for how he was treated at the end of his WWE tenure.
Oh, yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised. But even that, so I think he's talked about on his Twitch before of like he didn't hate his time in WWE.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying like how he was used at the end, like he was a massive joke. I'm just saying if he did have some choice words, I would sit there and go, you know what, Rusev or Miro now, I totally like see where you're coming from, because the best man in WWE is not as good as the best man in AEW.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other women I could see getting called up.
Like Dakota Kai, I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see Dakota Kai. I don't see Tegan Nox, because I don't know if Tegan Nox's injury is real or not.
Well, everything that I read is that so the injury didn't happen so everyone thought it happened when she got pinned by Candice LeRae in that Battle Royale. But I guess what happened is it wasn't there. It was when she was at rehab the next day, her knee popped. And then they discovered, so she has a torn ACL. So she is on the shelf again.
Okay.
Because that's everything I've been reading. It didn't happen in a match. It happened while she was at rehab. But yeah, she's got an ACL injury again.
Okay. Yeah, it's in such a weird spot of where, because like technically there were a few women's call up.
Yeah.
Because obviously, the Retribution members got called up. So Mia Yim is off the table. Mercedes Martinez off the table.
Well, and I'll ask you this before we move on into the men. With Retribution, do you think they get drafted as a tag team? Because I've seen some prediction sites go, oh, Retribution should be drafted. And it's like, to me, I see it as, no, they shouldn't. If anything, Mustafa Ali should be drafted. But, like, when you look at Retribution, they should be like how Brock Lesnar was last year, where it's like, fuck you, we don't play by your rules. We go on whatever brand we feel like.
Yeah, and I mean, they could do something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's just going to mostly depend on what they decide to do with them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just looking through the women's division and seeing if there's anyone who could get called up.
You're good. You're good. Raquel doesn't unless Dakota does.
Yeah, but even if they're slightly distancing them from each other, like I think they may be wanting to put Raquel in a more prominent position.
Yeah, because now Sonya Deville is not on TV.
Yeah, so they may be like, oh man, dude, we got Sonya Deville 2.0 in NXT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, because here's the thing I think about with NXT, and I'll just we'll talk about this a little bit later. I feel like there's women that could be called up only because they just infused 2 new women into the women's division with both Tony Storm?
Yeah, it's Tony Storm.
Who cut the promo after EO1, and then also Ember Moon. So it's like you just added 2 women to that women's division. You have to, like, there's got to be a little bit of a give and take where it's like, you kind of have to, whether it's Rhea Ripley and then Chelsea Green, whether it's Rhea Ripley and Candice LeRae, you need to bring 2 people up or have 2 people from NXT make a debut, because then you're just adding more people to the pot, and you got to then figure out how to use all these people.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we'll have to see. Like, I do think it's either going to be a combination of Ripley and LeRae or Ripley and Chelsea Green. I think it just depends on what they decide to do.
Soapy, let's move on into the men's division. We'll do the same thing as the women. We'll start with you. Give me your Raw men's division and then your SmackDown Raw division after the 2020 draft.
All right, so I got McIntyre, Keith Lee, AJ Styles, Randy Orton, Johnny Gargano, Seth Rollins, Buddy Murphy, Aleister Black, Ricochet, Big Show, Apollo Crews, Braun Strowman, Elias, and The Miz.
And that's all for Raw.
Yeah. Okay. Obviously, there's more, but just know that a lot of these people are considered tag teams. So.
Yeah, there's also going to be, like, with me, I kept it to people who are going to be drafted. There's going to be free agents after, like, each day that get thrown out there. So, like, there will be other people moved around through free agency. But what's your SmackDown lineup look like?
All right, my SmackDown is looking like a... I only put this one at the top of the list because I knew I'd fucking forget him by the time I got there. I'm not saying he's going to come in and beat the Tribal Chief.
Number 1 pick, man. The tribal.
Yeah, Jinder Mahal.
Hashtag my Tribal Chief.
Yeah, hashtag Jinder Mahal. Jinder Mahal, Roman Reigns, Baron Corbin, Daniel Bryan, Drew Gulak, Jeff Hardy. I have Lars Sullivan.
Okay.
Sami Zayn, Shorty G, Sheamus. I'm trying to remember who the fuck else I had going. I have Humberto Carrillo moving. Even though, like, he pairs with the Mysterios, it's just I don't know if it's just I don't like the fact that they just pair people that are the same race as each other. Just like, oh, you're Hispanic? Tag team, dude, home dog, let's go.
I have an interesting prediction with the Mysterios. I'm gonna save them till the tag team discussion because I have a little bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not a tricky situation, but a certain situation that I think will happen both nights. There'll be a part 1 and then a fallout on Monday. For me, my Raw draft picks are as follows. Raw will keep Randy Orton. They will keep Apollo Crews. Those will be their main guy picks from Friday. Then on Monday, they'll keep Drew McIntyre. They'll keep Seth Rollins. They will keep Keith Lee. The people they will get from SmackDown, I have Mustafa Ali being drafted. AJ Styles comes back to Raw. Braun Strowman is back on Raw. And then much like you, The Miz gets drafted to Raw as well. You'll see why I did that when I get to tag teams. And then for SmackDown, SmackDown keeps a lot of guys. Roman Reigns, The Fiend, Matt Riddle, Sami Zayn, Sheamus, Jeff Hardy, King Corbin, Daniel Bryan, Elias. The guys that they're going to get, the big one that I think is, here's the round one, Kevin Owens comes to Raw. I would love him to go to NXT, Soapy. We'll talk about him first. Because if NXT is involved, he would have been an NXT pick for me. But with everything they're setting up with The Fiend, I got Kevin Owens. Aleister Black will follow him to SmackDown. Ricochet will be a throw-in on Monday for SmackDown. And then one of my first big shakeups, along with Kevin Owens, Murphy goes to SmackDown. That's the Friday one. Murphy gets drafted, and it's like, holy shit, what's going on Monday? Because we already know Murphy's on SmackDown. What does that mean for Seth Rollins and the Mysterio family? So I've got two big shakeups. Like I said, Kevin Owens, Murphy, they are moving to SmackDown. Let's talk about Kevin Owens first, Soapy. If NXT is involved, should Kevin Owens be going to NXT? Because the rumors are that Kevin Owens wants to go to NXT. It's just Vince and Triple H, or just Vince, or just WWE in general, do not want him to be on NXT. They want him to be on the main roster. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all just really depends. Because my whole thought process I have going into this is, if we do have NXT involved, I have KO going there.
Yep.
And it's in a weird situation of where I think they don't like the fact that KO's a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
But like, he's not just gonna blindly be like, yes sir, no sir. He's gonna be like, no, fuck you. I'm going to do what I want to do.
So we're gonna give you time off with this injury. When you come back, we basically want you to lose 10 pounds. No, fuck off.
Yeah.
That's Kevin Owens.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I fucking love that about him.
It's the best. Like, I am who I am.
Yeah, and my whole thought process with just him moving is, I feel like he's stuck in such a weird spot on Raw, because it's like, okay, there's not a real definitive place he should go, because like, he isn't involved in the mid card, because that's basically right now the Hurt Business versus Apollo Crews.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, you know, like for a second there, like he was siding with Apollo Crews. So I'm like, okay, cool. When is he going to turn on Apollo Crews and become the U.S. champion? Because we know KO at this point.
Yeah.
His Ring of Honor theme was not lying. I'm not your friend and you're not mine. So, but then it was like, they didn't go anywhere with that. I don't see him getting involved with anything with McIntyre. So, like, I think they're just going to shake him up, be like, you know, it seems like KO needs a new scenery. And then I think he's going to be mostly mid-card for SmackDown, where like he's going to more or less be going for the Intercontinental title. So they may try to revive the Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens thing once he's done with all the stuff with The Fiend, if he does get drafted to SmackDown.
I completely agree with you. Like, that is my mindset 110% of what I think they're already sewing into is, right now him and The Fiend are having a feud, and it's right now, Kevin Owens is sort of protected. I know there's the Brand Invitational, which, fuck it. If you're on SmackDown, be on SmackDown. Don't have them cross over. Like, there are some stars like Retribution. They don't give a fuck. They'll go wherever they want. Brock Lesnar was the same way, of like, his attitude, like it, leave it, love it, hate it, is basically, I'm bigger than the company. I do what I want. That's why we had that when Fox wanted The Fiend, when it was basically Brock Lesnar, his character, not Brock Lesnar himself, his character said, I'm going to Raw because I don't give a fuck. And then The Fiend in the Universal Championship went over to SmackDown. With Kevin Owens, I would keep him on SmackDown. He feuds with The Fiend. He loses that feud. And we get yet again another victim of The Fiend that reverts back to an older version of KO. The KO I think he reverts back to is the KO we saw in NXT around 2015, when he was going for the NXT title against Sami Zayn, because I keep Sami Zayn and Jeff Hardy kind of feuding for the Intercontinental title. Ha ha ha, Jeff, I have your title. It's now mine, not yours. And then once that Fiend KO one ends, Aleister Black's the interesting one because there's a part of me that's even regretting having him on SmackDown in my predictions because he then adds a tricky situation, or do you just drop that feud completely to where I think it ultimately ends with KO turning full heel, and then we basically get what it would be heel Sami Zayn, or technically face in this Sami Zayn against heel Kevin Owens, where basically KO just starts calling Sami on all of his chicken shit, like basically his chicken shit, to where it's like, you're not a real champion, you're fucking fake. Look at that. Look, you stand there as the great liberator. Who the hell have you even liberated? What does that even mean, Sami? And then that goes into Kevin Owens' main role on that brand being, like you said, where he's going for the IC title.
Yeah, and it pains me to fucking just say that KO is going for the IC title because I want that man to be a top champion. But like,
don't feel bad. The IC title is a prestigious title.
Yeah, but like, I'd rather.
It's better than the U.S. Championship.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's true.
So like, you got a point there. I mean, Shawn Michaels held the IC title, man. It is a prestigious title.
Yeah, I think it's just right now with me, especially because my whole thing is like, I want KO to go wherever he goes. I want him to succeed. Yeah. My whole worry right now is just, like, I'm so dead set on like, if NXT is in this, he is NXT. I don't give a single fuck. But yeah, I think doing something like that would be good because obviously, you know, I almost wonder at the same time though, like if they kind of make it a slow build of like, did KO change? Like, has he changed from the Fiend? Like, I think what they may do is try to pair him back up with Sami Zayn.
Oh, okay.
To where basically he acts as like Sami Zayn's muscle, kind of like what they had Shinsuke and Cesaro do for him.
Ooh, I like that. I really
to where
like that.
I don't want to say like, oh, you recreate his turn on Sami from NXT, but like you do something like it, of where like Sami wins a match, and then that's when you start setting up their feud. Because if you want, you set it up for WrestleMania.
I like that.
Because you have it that, because whatever pay-per-view it is before, I don't remember what pay-per-view it normally is before WrestleMania, because it sometimes changes. I don't remember if it's like...
It's usually Fastlane is what it is. I'll look up if they have it scheduled for... Yeah, usually it's the Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber in February, and then I think Fastlane is in March.
Yeah. So it's, I think, the last pay-per-view before, I think that's when you set it up that KO turns on Sami, and that's when it's kind of like, oh shit, he has been changed by the Fiend. To where like he kind of gets that more sadistic heel version of himself back. Not so much the like fun-loving character that we have now, where he's like, how many fucking spooky characters are going to come after me?
All right, so it depends. I'm going to say it's more like a Fastlane situation because in 2019, the road to WrestleMania was Royal Rumble, then Elimination Chamber in February, Fastlane in March. That's where we got the whole, I want to say that's where we got the Charlotte Becky match. If blah, blah, blah wins. If Becky wins, it's a triple threat match at WrestleMania, and then we had WrestleMania. Last year, they had a Super Showdown, which was in Saudi Arabia. So they had Royal Rumble, Super Showdown, Elimination Chamber, and then WrestleMania. Because of COVID, and I don't see it going away anytime soon, I think it's going to look more like 2019, where we have Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber, Fastlane, Backlash, whatever pay-per-view they want to bring back for that March. And then we get WrestleMania in April. The one thing I feel bad about, so I don't feel bad about, I'm just confused about with the draft, is, so like Kevin Owens, we both have an idea of like, oh, if he gets drafted to SmackDown, this is what he does. Even on Raw, I have an idea of what's gonna happen, where You have players like Drew and Randy going back at each other. Edge, when he comes back from injury, will decide if Randy takes the title off of McIntyre. If he doesn't, though, you can have Keith Lee go up against McIntyre for the title. And even before McIntyre gets to that point, they've already set up Keith Lee going after Braun Strowman. Like this, they had an unsanctioned match this last Monday on Raw, to where it's like, Raw has some interesting parts. You've got Braun Strowman, you've got Keith Lee, that's a feud. McIntyre Orton is going somewhere. My question is with SmackDown, because, I mean, we both didn't have, I don't think we didn't have too many similar or changes between ours. Roman Reigns, what do they do after the Jey Uso thing? Because, like, I look at my SmackDown roster and it's like, what, does he go up against The Fiend again? Do you throw Matt Riddle into a Universal shot against the Tribal Chief? Do you have Jeff Hardy go for the title? Like, Roman Reigns, I think, is one where nobody knows what's coming next. But, like, after he's done with the Jey Uso and he makes his stable, besides The Fiend, will SmackDown have someone that they can have go ahead and feud with Roman?
Yeah, and I think this is where, and this was the thing that I thought of, and I guess I'll bring up I didn't put them on a list because I didn't think it was going to happen.
Yeah.
What if this is when they decide, we're bringing up someone from NXT.
Mm-hmm.
I brought this name up yesterday, and I was like, I don't know if they would do that.
Yeah.
Because, it may be too early. What if they decide they're like, Roman doesn't have a credible threat. They wait a little bit.
Yeah.
And they say, in free agency, they signed Karrion Kross. And they bring him and Scarlett up.
That would be fucking sick, because he has to get over his injury anyways. I don't see this Jey Uso Roman thing. Basically, at Hell in a Cell, it will pretty much end, I think, maybe. Because it's got the ultimate stipulation, which you and I were talking about yesterday, and you took the words right out of my mouth of like, oh, the stipulation's probably going to be if you lose, you become basically, I don't want to use the word slave, but like a part of you become a part of my stable against your will kind of a thing, to where it's like, you won't call me your tribal chief. Well, I'm going to beat you down until you're mine. Kind of a thing. And that's where we get like the Roman Reigns stable that has been getting teased. I like Karrion Kross, but at the same time, it's like, would that be feeding him to Roman? Because he's not going to beat Roman.
Yeah, like I was saying more or less of like a long-term thing of like, you kind of hold that off and to where they say, like they could say like, we signed someone in free agency. And like, for instance, you could have like for weeks or something like that, like commentary being like, oh, well, who'd they sign? Like, we have no idea who they signed.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think if there's anyone. Because the only reason why I don't like the fact that I moved Strowman is just because I'm like, that does leave SmackDown's like main event very wide open.
Question.
Because like,
instead of them, because I had Murphy move over, and there's a reason why I have that. Instead of Murphy moving over, could we see a night one on Friday, Seth Rollins drafted to SmackDown? And that sets up, it's like the next person he goes up against it's basically the tribal chief versus the Messiah. To where it's like, basically that's where the Messiah character ends, because the whole feud is wrapped around Roman he basically calls his shot. I want the Messiah next. There's only one big dog here.
See, my only thing is, though, I don't think you put both of them on there, because then you put two of the company's biggest heels in the main event, to where then it kind of leaves SmackDown's like in between of like upper mid card. It leaves that just barren at that point, because then it's,
would this then be a face turn
gap
for Seth Rollins? That's what I'm thinking. Like, this is a chance where it's not necessarily Roman versus Seth. It's Roman It's Tribal Chief demolishing and finally killing the Messiah, where through this, Seth turns back face, and then the Messiah character is dead, and Seth moves on into something else.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's something where I think it really depends on what they want to do with the Messiah, because obviously me and you have talked about it before in the past, where I said, like, I think whenever they start getting closer to Becky giving birth, that's when they're going to give Seth some time off. Like, I think you wait to kill off the Messiah character until that. Like, I think you have it, his last match is when the Messiah character gets killed. Or not killed, but, like, he loses, and it's basically he goes away for a while. And then when he comes back, like, that's when you could just do the whole thing of, like, oh, my time off, I've changed, or something like that. Yeah,
it's just, for me, that's the question of what do you do with Roman when this Jey Uso stuff ends, because I feel like everything else is kind of not predictable, but it's like, okay, this fits over here with KO, this fits over here. I love prediction articles that list Tommaso Ciampa, because I even brought it up to you last night, Soapy. I'm like, oh, what if they bring up Ciampa? And you reminded me that Ciampa has said in the past that if he gets called up, he'll quit.
Yeah.
So, like, to me, I was like, ooh, maybe they don't call up Tommaso.
Yeah, and that's the thing of where, because then we also had the conversation about Johnny getting called up, and I said, like, Johnny said, like, he'd prefer to stay in NXT because he loves the situation there. Of, like, he loves how they're not traveling. Like, they don't have the insane work schedule that the main roster has. He's able to hang out with his friends, and my whole thing just with him getting called up is, like, I think it's, obviously, they may just do it like as a temporary thing.
Yeah.
Because obviously, I think with a lot of the call-ups from this one, especially because I mostly have mine just based off, like, okay, we just need people on the roster for COVID. Like, I'm thinking that, for instance, they could build someone up. Because this was honestly what I was thinking, and this is, like, future down the line stuff.
Go ahead.
You have Damian Priest keep building up wins, and eventually when he loses, you can have NXT trade Damian Priest for Gargano. To, like, then you could be like, okay, yeah, cool. Gargano can go back down to NXT. We're finally ready for Priest to be on the main roster, or something like that. I think you could pull something like that. On the main
roster. I would love it.
Yeah, like, I think you can pull something like that, and I think that's what they would do.
Yeah,
but I think it's really going to depend on what they decide to do. I think the men's roster, I don't want to be like, oh, the men's roster is more interesting. It's just a lot of these people are locked into stables and tag teams.
Yeah.
To where it made it really hard to move anybody.
Yeah. And you brought up the magical word, tag teams. Let's move into them. They're the last thing we have. Soapy, we'll start with you. Give us your Raw tag teams and then your SmackDown tag teams after the draft.
All right. So, after the draft, I have the Raw tag division being the Hurt Business, the Street Profits, Angel and Andrade, the Mysterios, Undisputed Era, Riot Squad, and Heavy Machinery.
So, correct me just so I'm thinking this right. The only one moving over to Raw is Heavy Machinery? Besides Undisputed Era. I'm talking about, like, main roster guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Machinery's the only one that moves, and it's just because they want to keep Otis and his Peach together.
I agree. How about SmackDown?
All right, so SmackDown, I have the Viking Raiders, or
the Viking
Raiders. Yeah, they move over. New Day, the Usos, Forgotten Sons, and Rudolph.
So,
and obviously there's like the Artist Collective, but
one question, which I'm shocked you didn't have the Artist Collective being drafted, because I wanted to put the Viking Raiders down. Here's the one thing, though, that kept me from it, and this is a spoiler for me. Ivar has a neck injury right now. Like, the last time we saw him was he injured his neck, and everything that I read had not shown an update, and this happened like a month ago. So, like, for me, I want to put the Viking Raiders down, but I wonder if it's is he going to be medically cleared to basically wrestle? Or, like we mentioned before, do injuries not matter? Like, will Raw go, fuck it, we want Charlotte Flair? I know she's injured, but we are taking Charlotte Flair. That was
I mostly just have it so, for instance, that it's they're taking Eric instead of Ivar.
Oh, okay.
But like basically they're taking them as a team.
Yeah.
Because it'd be the same thing of like if AOP was still in the company, which they're not.
They would take
like,
what was it?
Occam.
Occam, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they would take Occam or Razor, whichever one wasn't hurt. Because they basically traded back and forth.
I got my tag teams getting shooken up a little bit. I'll start with Raw. The two that are staying. So Raw is going to get 4 tag teams via the draft. The first one is Andrade and Angel. They stay. The Hurt Business also stays. Because Sammy stays, you got to have the U.S. title. They won't just draft Bobby, they'll draft the entire Hurt Business. A SmackDown team moving over to Raw, I agree with you. Heavy Machinery. They move over. But how I have them moving over is just the icing on the cake. Because I also have the Undisputed Era moving over. For SmackDown, they're going to have a little bit more tag teams, so Raw will have to sign some via free agency. I've got the Artist Collective, the New Day, basically for Big E, but they'll keep Kofi and Xavier too. Lucha House Party and the Usos staying on SmackDown. The 2 big tag teams that SmackDown gets, though, is I have the very last pick of Friday night. The Street Profits get drafted to SmackDown. Very last pick. Street Profits are coming, and everyone's going to be like, oh shit, how does that even work? The Raw Tag Team Champs have been drafted. What does this mean for the tag division and everything? And I think they do something where the first night on Raw, or some point during Raw when they address it, Heavy Machinery cashes in on Raw, defeats them, and then gets drafted that night to be on Raw. So that's how you kind of end that Money in the Bank thing. Because on Friday, we're supposed to have a segment where Heavy Machinery and Otis defends himself in court. That ends. Street Profits get drafted. On Monday, he cashes in his briefcase. Boom, we're done with it. Money in the Bank is then over. Heavy Machinery's Raw Tag Team Champs. So the Street Profits can move over and have a feud with the Artist Collective. And then the other big tag team, the Mysterio family, Rey Mysterio and son Dominic, come back to SmackDown, Soapy.
All right.
What do you think about that one? Will SmackDown bring Rey back to SmackDown?
See, I think the Mysterios and Rollins and all them stay on Raw.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they're one of the biggest things happening on Raw.
Yeah, but
I don't think that...
Is that going to be the thing moving forward, though, after you add Braun Strowman, after you add AJ Styles?
Well, I mean, you still need something to fill the upper mid-card. Like, the whole thing is, I think AJ would then be the next person to feud with the Hurt Business.
Yeah.
Like, I think he would start feuding with Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
Because then, for instance, like, I think Bobby works really well with little guys.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, AJ's not, like, a super insanely little guy, but, like, he's nimble enough that, like, he's going to get the best out of Bobby.
Yeah.
We're going to see basically what I always wanted to see in fucking TNA of Bobby versus AJ. Which I think that probably happened a few times, but I'm dumb and I don't remember it.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I would have AJ do.
Yeah, and I think right now with mine, it was more or less of like basically making your mid card actually enjoyable.
Well, and the thing that is the biggest wrench into this, and I put them down, you put them down. I'm gonna be completely honest. In my heart of hearts, I don't think they get drafted. I think it's just all wishful thinking by us, because at the end of TakeOver you had the what was his name, Timothy, the Dexter Loomis looking motherfucker, what's his name, I thought
Ridge Hollins.
Yeah, Ridge Hollins, Mr. Ridge. I did not mean to call you a motherfucker, by the way, just terminology. they set that up at the end of TakeOver to where I'm like, Yui ain't moving. Yui ain't going to get drafted. But, like,
this is wishful thinking. Damn.
There's a part of me that's like, that's another thing. Like, you mentioned, like, oh, what's going to be there? Like, I look at my Raw, and the tag team kind of helps us out of, like, by bringing Yui in, you then have Drew and Randy feud. You have a Braun Keith Lee. You have Bobby AJ. The reason why I'm moving the Mysterios and Murphy over to SmackDown is that separates them from Seth to where I put Adam Cole's first feud against Seth Rollins. You have Adam Cole and Seth Rollins, basically the two of the Triple H chosen ones, to where Seth was the one he put the championship on first. Now Adam Cole is the Triple H guy. So it's kind of like you have that past and present thing going there. Then you also have Fish and either Fish and Strong or Fish and O'Reilly can go for the tag team belts and kind of feud with. First, they would probably feud with Andrade and Angel, depending on Angel's injury after we saw that at the last pay-per-view. But they can feud with Heavy Machinery. You've got then either Kyle O'Reilly or Roderick Strong, whichever one you don't do. You can throw him into either a feud with The Miz, either into that AJ Styles, Bobby Lashley feud, like after we get the AJ Styles and Lashley stuff, to where it's like they're the ones that make everything to where it's like, wow, Raw can have some good storylines. Where then on SmackDown, it's like, okay, we have the KO stuff. We've got the Sami Zayn stuff. Here's another storyline where the two that I'm coming in with tag teams is one. The Street Profits then being like, well, we don't have our Raw tag team champs anymore. Looks like we're going to have to take those SmackDown ones off the Artist Collective. It gives Cesaro and Shinsuke a feud to go against because, let's be honest, the New Day's been injured. If I see the Artist Collective and Lucha House Party one more time, I think I'm going to blow my brains out. And what they can do with Murphy and Mysterio is basically, we're going to keep that story going and have a feud basically between Dominic and Murphy because of what we've got on Raw. But we're taking Seth out of the equation. We're going to move you guys to SmackDown, have that story continue itself. And have kind of the love triangle of like Murphy's in love with Aaliyah, but Dominic and Ray are not accepting of it. And then you don't have Seth there that kind of like convolutes the story a little bit to where it's like, that's me. I'm thinking storylines with all of my moves. That's mainly why I have the Mysterio family moving over to SmackDown.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the chance they do that. Because my whole thing is just, with if they move them,
yeah,
I think that's kind of where it gets like, oh, like that's kind of like, to me, that just kind of throws it off a little bit. Because then,
what do you mean by throw it off?
Like, why have this story ongoing on one side just to move it to another brand? Like, typically with the draft, it's to shake up storylines.
Yeah,
because then, for instance, like,
you're shaking it up, it's just moving to SmackDown instead of Raw.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point, though, of why just continue the story. Like, typically with the draft, like normally if you're separating people or moving them, like, they're done with that storyline. That's why I don't have, like, any of the people with the Messiah Maniacs or the Mysterios moving.
Okay.
It's just because they would wait until that storyline's done before even considering moving them. That's why I think the only people I have moving that are in a storyline are... Actually, I don't even think I have anyone in the storyline that's not moving.
Yeah.
KO's the only one, but that's also just because he's kind of being brought into another one.
Well, he's being brought into one with The Fiend.
Yeah, because he went from one with Alistair to where now he's getting into one with The Fiend, so...
Yeah. Maybe what you're thinking about, I'm starting to think maybe the easier decision would just be to... because like you said, move one, because like the one thought I had, I've got a million thoughts going on right now. There was one that I was like, oh, well, by moving that storyline of the Mysterios and Murphy to SmackDown, now would this work? I don't know. But it could be something of like, oh, we want to make sure for the people who just watch Raw that they check out SmackDown as well. odds are if you're a wrestling fan, you're checking out both, but there are casuals out there. Maybe the casuals that are intrigued on that, I don't know why you would, because Raw is not the most popular show. Let's go ahead and check out SmackDown to see where that story goes. But like you said, if it's to kind of advance a story, they usually have it stay. That's why I'm kind of thinking, oh, should I have had it reversed where Seth gets moved? That story still stays on Raw. It's just, hey, Seth, you're getting pulled from this story. We are basically going on into season 3, and we are plucking you from that season.
Well, no, and I still think Seth plays a huge part into that story. Like, obviously, they're trying to make it more into the Buddy Murphy side, but Seth still plays a critical role in it. To where it's, he's like this constant annoyance to Buddy. Of where, for instance, he's always constantly pestering Murphy of like, you're not listening to me. You're not doing what a disciple should do.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just see that as like, with me, two things. First off, I feel like by focusing so much on that, they're like Dominic, to me, his main role in this so far is I run in, I get mad at my sister. I beat up Buddy Murphy because he's going to date my sister. To where I feel like everything that they set up with you, what you just said of like, you're supposed to be what a disciple has. I don't think that needs like a pay-per-view match to end that. I think it can end on Raw to where it's like, or end on SmackDown, however they want to do it. Where on Raw, this upcoming Raw, it ends. Like, let's say, in this case, Murphy and Mysterio's don't get drafted to SmackDown. It ends on Raw, and at the end of Raw, SmackDown drafts Seth Rollins to where it's like, okay, we have now ended that. We can now move Murphy in. And then that way you kind of prop up Dominic a little bit, which I think is the main goal from this, because Dominic and Murphy are the two that should be propped up from this, not Seth.
Yeah, and obviously you already know my stance on Murphy. I fucking love Murphy.
Yeah.
Ever since they started the group, like I already started thinking about like, okay, like what are they gonna do when they break apart? And I said I thought Murphy would be like the Judas to this group of like, but not like in a bad way.
He just backstabs Seth Rollins. He's the one to turn.
Yeah, like he becomes the traitor of like he's the one who, kind of how Last Supper it was the whole one of you will betray me. And for instance, like I almost thought like that's how you could make Buddy Murphy into a star.
Yeah,
and like
you're gonna be a star,
definitive
kid.
Like like into an uppercard guy is when he turned like basically when he obviously. I felt like they kind of dropped the ball a little bit with it, and we could talk about that at a different date.
Bookmark that one.
But yeah,
go ahead. I didn't know you had more to say. Go ahead.
Oh no, and I was just gonna say it's then beat Seth. Seth goes off to go be a dad.
Well, that's gonna happen around, if my math is correct, and it also determines of how long Becky was pregnant. But let's go with May, because that's when Money in the Bank was. February is usually 9 months after May. Big brain math right here. Had to map that one out a little bit earlier in the show. That's why you saw me like count with my fingers when you brought up Seth before. Last thing I want to do so, because we're getting a little pressed for time. NXT. First thing I will ask you, should they be involved in the draft?
Yes. That's all I got is just yes.
I was like, not gonna give a reason why, just a simple yes.
No. Well, if you want to treat NXT as a third brand, they have to be involved.
Yeah, I mean the thing that I wonder is if they are involved, is Kevin Owens the only one? Because like I said it, you said it. You said that Kevin Owens would be moving to NXT if we had them a part of it. I would agree with you. The only other question, this is from the Twitterverse of people kind of trying to will this into existence, would AJ Styles be joining him? Could we see a shakeup of both KO and AJ go down to NXT or go over to NXT because they would be the third brand?
Yeah, and because I had said this before. I think it was last night when we were talking about it. I'm like, I don't know if AJ would take that as a slight or not, because I don't know if he views NXT just still as developmental.
Yeah, no, I see your point.
Yeah, and that's my whole thing of with them having that a situation where it's like people are still divided on it. Over like obviously NXT still has call ups and everything, but like I think the only reason they would ever send AJ down is if they are still really trying to compete with AEW for ratings.
Yeah.
Because then, for instance, like you can have it that AJ, I think he's already technically a Triple Crown champion, but just keep fucking building that resume to where, like, at some point he's probably gonna get the NXT championship.
Yeah.
To where he could literally be like, I've held the top belt literally every place I've gone.
And like, the only thing I think of is if NXT would be a part of it, and if you're gonna draft AJ and Kevin Owens. To me, it's like, okay, if you're going to add both of them to NXT, I would almost guarantee then, okay, Undisputed Era goes to Raw. Because what I think you can do then is you can add those top guys, you can have Undisputed Era leave, and you can have openings for both. Because they had Kyle O'Reilly go up against Finn. I don't know who the next challenger for Finn is. Keith Lee's up on Raw. Gargano, I don't think, has his title shot yet. They're not going to pay off the champ just yet. They will, though. This story will not die like the Hacker. It will not die like other storylines. This one will get paid off in the future of the Gargano champ. But there's just a part of me that's like, we haven't seen Tommaso Ciampa in a while. Gargano, I don't think, is going for the title anytime soon. You'll move Cole up. Keith Lee's up. Cross is injured. You need someone for Finn to go up against. I feel like KO gets drafted. KO against Finn. You have those epic battles like you used to have between KO and Finn back, 5 years ago in NXT? I know some people might see that as like, oh, where's the developmental part of that? But it's like, for this portion of it, we don't need that for NXT. And then AJ comes down, and AJ could basically be like Damian Prince cuts a promo, and then it's just, boom, we don't want none. We don't want none. And AJ cuts his promo of saying, you don't even know what competition is, kid. I'm the phenomenal one. I'll hit you with an elbow if I have, or a forearm if I have to. And then AJ can basically go into a feud with Priest to build him up to get him ready for an eventual call up to the main roster.
Yeah, and I think also if we're talking about people going down to NXT as well from the draft, one of my SmackDown tags would go down.
Which I would again.
The Forgotten Sons.
Okay.
And the reason I think they would go back down, and I only have them going back down if UE goes up, because the whole thing I felt that the Sons struggled with was
there's only
were a heel.
There's only 3 tag teams right now at NXT, it seems.
Yeah. Well, and the whole reason that I'm saying that I think they go back down if UE goes up is because I think the reason why Forgotten Sons were viewed as such a bad thing in NXT was because they were a heel stable in a brand dominated by a heel stable.
Yeah.
And I think it's, at that point, it opens up for the fact that, for instance, the Sons could be like, we've competed against the New Day. We've competed against the Usos, Heavy Machinery. It's like, and basically, I honestly say, like, in their first month of being back, have them win the tag belts. And as much as I love the Fashion Police, have them absolutely shit on the Fashion Police.
I just look at that tag team division, and it's basically, you have Imperium, you have the Fashion Police, and then you have UE are your main 3. And then basically, and I know you're saying, well, Walter's not there. They have the main, like, the UE tag team, they have the Imperium tag team guys on NXT right now.
No, and the thing I was going to say was, I think it's just because they were already in the States.
Yeah.
And they haven't been able to go back.
Yeah. But that's the only tag teams they have. They've got UE, the Imperium guys, Breezango, and then, oh, wait, we need someone to get squashed. Let's throw Everrise out there. Let's throw Oni and Lorcan out there. Because we need Imperium.
I mean, Oni Lorcan's one person, by the way.
Who's the other one? Birch and Lorcan. I was thinking Danny Birch.
I was gonna say Oni and Lorcan. Like who?
You know what I meant though. Birch and Orkin.
Yeah.
But to where it's like, I just like those are the only tag teams. Like that needs the NXT tag teams need a shakeup. But like I look at the tag teams even I have drafted. Hurt Business ain't going down. Machinery ain't going down. Usos no. Street Profits no. Like if I'm gonna have any tag teams move down, it's either the Lucha House Party, which I don't see happening. The other one that I could see working, Andrade and Angel Garza. To where it's like maybe one of those things of like they go into a storyline of like NXT drafts them and then Andrade and Angel feel slighted that they have to come down to where it's like almost like a redemption story of like, you know what? On Raw, we were too worried about the outside noise going on. We have to come together so that we can rock this division and get back to the main roster. And that's kind of a redemption arc for Andrade and Angel Garza, brings them together. And then by the time they get back to the main roster after eventually winning NXT Gold, that's when you have a reconciling with Zelina Vega, who will be doing her own thing on the main roster.
Yeah, and I think my main thing that I think that they should do is obviously I don't know everyone who's in the Performance Center right now.
Yeah.
I would say maybe start looking to see are any of those people like tag team worthy, or you pay off the fact of before obviously we knew Velveteen was into little kids.
Do you
pay off the tag team of Loomis and Velveteen? Like, do you have them finally team together?
No, well, I know they will. You just brought up a question I wasn't going to ask, but I will to end my last question. Because like Swerve Scott was one I was going to bring up. I don't think he gets called up in the end. I wanted to, like, because last year there were 205 lives that got called up, Drake Maverick and Tozawa. I don't think Swerve Scott, because technically he's part of Cruiserweight, which is 205 live. I don't want to ask it, but I'm going to. Does WWE piss off its fan base even more and draft Velveteen Dream to the main roster?
I mean, there's a very strong chance. Obviously, they don't care.
I'm going to say that would piss people off. I feel like people would be furious if Velveteen Dream gets drafted to either SmackDown or Raw.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's just the fact of we have no fucking idea. Like, it's obviously we've all seen DMs and everything. We all know Velveteen's like that, and WWE always does the whole like, we've done internal investigations and we didn't find anything, and it's like,
you found what you
whatever.
wanted to find. You ignored what you wanted to ignore.
I don't think he gets called up just yet, I think it's just because I think they want to try to wait and see if the fan reception gets any better.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's kind of why I think they pair him and Loomis together, of where like you get the attentions more off of Dream.
Yeah.
In that situation of where it's not like, like it's not just only Dream is winning these fucking singles matches. It could be like, like Loomis is winning matches.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
No, I gotcha. Like, that's just one thought I had is, do they piss people off and call him up? Any final thoughts, Soapy, before we wrap this up? Because I'm looking at the clock and we got to get to a Games Live and do that on Twitch. So any final thoughts before I wrap this up?
No. Do you want to talk about the thing that we may be doing tomorrow? The draft thing?
So what we're going to do is, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is kind of like a special episode 3 of the podcast. So if you're watching this on YouTube, usually the patrons get this first. We're gold and above. They get it a week before everyone else. We will be recording our real episode 3, which will be called episode 4, tomorrow, which patrons will get. What would that be? Patrons would get this Friday, October 8th, if my dates are right. So patrons would get it the 8th. Everyone else would see it the next Friday, which would be the 15th, I think? Yeah, the 15th, maybe. I got a fucking computer in front of me, Soapy. Why don't I do that? No, I was wrong. Today's Tuesday, not Wednesday. So patrons would get it Thursday the 8th. Everyone else would get it Thursday the 15th. And what Soapy and I are going to do is we are going to do a mock WWE draft where, yes, we will know the outcomes after everyone else sees this, but it would basically be we are taking over Raw, we are taking over SmackDown, and maybe NXT is included. I don't know. We'll leave you to see if they're included in our mock draft. And it's basically, all right, Soapy, you're on the clock for SmackDown. Boom, who do you pick? And we're going through talking about who we would select and do our own mock WWE draft. It's going to be fun. So if you want to check that out before it comes out on the 15th, you can. Patreon.com/MVP vids. Become a supporter at the gold or above tier. And then you can see that as early as October 8th. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be a great podcast, just like I had fun recording this one with you, Soaps, talking about everything going on with the draft, all the storylines that could be happening. I can't wait for Friday. I can't wait to see, I don't want to be let down, though. I don't want to be where it's like, oh my God, I can't wait for this big shakeup. And then it's like, oh, great, nothing got shooken up at all, and everything kind of stayed the same. I think this one's going to be a lot different, though, than last year, because like we mentioned, Becky's gone, Charlotte's gone, and what's basically going to happen with the rosters moving forward. But that's going to do it for us. Make sure to, like I said, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/MVPvid. Hit that like button, hit that sub button, as we love for you to do, to stay on track so that you're getting all these podcasts when they release each and every week. Now, thank you guys for checking this one out, and as always, have a good day, everybody.
Bye.